I'm a licensed clinical psychotherapist. I have degrees in psychology, theology, and marriage and family therapy, and a national certification in dialectical behavioral therapy. In this video, I'm not seeking to diagnose anyone. I'm only willing to offer insight into situations like these. Hi, thank you for being here. Adrix first, as per usual, as should be. And Nina is here. Nina, I'm wearing the bracelet you got me. Guys, this is Aventurine, heals the heart chakra. We're going to talk about some woo-woo stuff today a little bit, so it's good to get that in there that I'm wearing the crystals. Also Moldavite here. This is Moldavite. Okay, so this is called Owning Your Shit. So I was asked to cover a video by Carolyn Mays. BGS asked me to cover that video. And so we're going to look at that. This will be the first time I'm playing a video on a video. So fingers crossed I get there. But I wanted to look at who Carolyn Mays was. It's spelled M-Y-S-S, because whoever we're going to listen to, we need to know who they are. You know, similarly in my on my channel, I've got my credentials in there and what my experience is. So when we listen to people who set themselves as experts, we need to understand who they are and where they're coming from, not to negate what they're saying at all, but to understand who they are, right? So Carolyn Mays, she has, and of course I have my notes right here. She has a master's in theology. She's the author of books on mysticism and wellness. Her most recent book was published in 2013. She describes herself as a medical intuitive and a mystic. She was a regular on the Oprah Winfrey Show and then did some stuff on the OWN network. Her critics say she is unsubstantiated and pseudoscientific. So let's talk about unsubstantiated and pseudoscientific. We have to use discernment a lot of times because there are people who were considered quacks when they first started talking about something. And we find out that they were actually right. Or, ancient teachings were viewed as completely accurate, and then we start treating them like they're woo-woo, and sometimes they come full circle and we're like, oh wait, they were right. So just because something is called pseudoscientific or that it's unsubstantiated in research or whatever doesn't mean it's right, wrong, or otherwise. Okay, so some examples would be integrative health. So that is a healthcare industry that teaches mindfulness and meditation, because mindfulness and meditation reduces blood pressure, so there's factual stuff there. Jung himself was a lot of his thoughts he kept to himself. That's why he made the Red Book. That's why he kept things to himself, because he knew how he would come across. In fact, there were times he had to consider for himself, do I have schizophrenia? Am I nuts? Am I psychotic? Excuse me. But now we're finding that a lot of Jung's teachings actually fall in line with quantum physics, right? So it doesn't mean he was wrong. And he taught about meditation. The Rig Veda, teaches about chakras, which is considered mysticism. And psychology in and of itself, we use interventions like mindfulness and meditation and somatic therapies and things like that, which could be considered mystic or were mystic when they first were created. But then we found out, they actually work. So let's go through this video. I thought it might be fun, albeit nerve-wracking for me, to not watch the video ahead of time and just respond to things as I go. Um, I thought it might be interesting to not be as prepared. I'm trying to be a little less rigid and organized all the time. Not in every facet of my life, of course, I'm not, but um, when it comes to my work, I'm very organized. So, we ready to get into it? All right. So, let's see if we can get this. Told you guys I'm going to figure this out. Or not. There it is. Okay. So let's go through. When I go to play this, if you can hear it, please put a 1 in the chat. If the sound is not playing, please put a 2 so that I know that it's not working. Okay.
Hi, everybody. This is not going to be an easy video for me to make, an easy message. And I just feel like I need to comment on the shooting that happened in Highland Park. Not just Highland Park, these shootings. And there was a shooting down my block here in Oak Park a couple of weeks ago, an exchange of 30 bullets on my block. Police were here all night. And in Highland Park, which is a neighborhood I visit all the time, and a family I love very, very, very dearly, is from that neighborhood. And the thought that something could happen to them is more than I can even think about. I watch the boys grow up. I adore them. Let me ask you something to think about. When someone is angry, do you think that it's okay for them, for anyone, to take their anger out on you? To come home, for example, and yell at you because they've had a bad day? No, there's nothing okay about that. It's called abuse. It's called abuse. And somehow there a pattern has developed, has sunk in, has penetrated into our collective that compels people to think that if we are wounded, that our wounds need to be shared. They need.
Okay. Here's something I gotta say, because that right there reminded me of I don't know what interview it was on. I don't remember why, but James Baldwin and Nikki Giovanni. If you guys know what I'm talking about, put it in the chat. But James Baldwin and Nikki Giovanni were talking, and she said something about lie to me, and James Baldwin was like, "Oh, I can't lie to you." And she was saying, "You lie all day. Why don't you come home and lie to me?" You smile at your boss, you're nice to people at work. Um, you lie to me in other situations. Why can't you be nice to me? And I'm gonna let my brain marinate on that for a second, because it just reminds me of that there's a balance, right? Like there has to be, we have to have a space where we can let our hair down and not be fake without it, without taking it out on our person, right? Like that's where the line is. But if I'm angry about something that happened and I come home and I'm expressing anger but not at my person, that should be okay. If I'm expressing my frustration, if I'm, if my man walks in the door and somebody just said something real crappy to him and he couldn't do anything about it, um he needs to feel safe to express his anger and his ire and his frustration and all of those things. So it's making me think about, at first it made me think about that interview, but it's also making me think about how do you find the balance of being the safe space for your man or for your woman, um, and it not crossing the line of taking it out on the other person. So Victoria says, sounds bad, but I agree with her logic. A beautiful man lie is what I call it. Yeah. Trust says Baldwin, if I love you, I can't lie to you. Giovanni, of course you can lie to me and you will. Yeah. And two amazing speakers, right? Having this conversation. If you guys have not watched the video, you have to watch it because both of them are just such great speakers, and them having this conversation, it was just mesmerizing. Okay. All right, let's keep going. Let's keep going with the video.
Need to be somehow or other, we're owed something if we're wounded. Years ago, I wrote a book, Why People Don't Heal. Because I was fascinated with the power of wounds. And I described it as wound elegy. That I was absolutely intrigued with, given all the options of healing that people have, the power of woundedness is even more potent than becoming whole. That becoming whole is, in fact, the greatest challenge that we have. Pulling together our fragments, getting over our wounds. That we discover early on that woundedness is its own language, is its own power system. That we learn that being wounded is a way of controlling the outside world.
Ooh. Ooh. Being wounded is a way to control the outside world. It's not necessarily the outside world, although I get where she's going with this, but we absolutely can control the people around us, right? Like we use our wounds, or what now we're calling trauma and triggers and all of these kind of things. We utilize those to as a preemptive excuse. So this is what's coming to mind right now, is that we use it as a preemptive excuse. Like if I say somebody shutting the door hard, not slamming, but somebody shutting the door hard triggers me. And so then everybody in the house has to be super mindful of how they shut the door. Instead of, if that's a trigger for me, like I get triggered and upset when people shut the door hard, then it's actually my responsibility to process that so that doors shutting hard don't trigger me. But instead, I use it as a way to control the people around me unconsciously. I'm sure most of the time it's unconsciously, to get them to behave in a certain way. And I don't know if she gets into this, but it also prevents me from having to do anything about my trigger, because now everybody doesn't trigger me. Everybody's tiptoeing and won't trigger me, and so I'm not forced into in any way of processing that and figuring out where that trigger comes from and getting past it, getting over it, getting beyond it, those kind of things, because now everybody's making my environment comfortable just for me. Right? Hi, compassionate. Okay. BGS says microaggressions. Yeah, can see that. Okay, let's keep going. Let's see what she does.
And to add to that, this incredible complex thinking that somehow if we're wounded, we're owed something. By whom? Well, society. We can sue. We can stay vulnerable, that if we're wounded, I can't do that. I just had such a bad day. I get to sit certain places. I get privilege if I'm wounded. I get to control others. I've had such a bad time. And that when you decide to get over your wounds, you have to give up that kind of vulnerability, because we do not have a model of health in which strength and vulnerability go together. We don't have that. We don't have that. If we look at these killers, these kids, these young men that go on these rampages, Uvalde, Highland Park, Philadelphia, these killers, and we could just keep naming them, Columbine, wherever you want to go, they're all wounded. They're all angry. They're so angry. They can't, the Proud Boys, what do they have? Boys. They call themselves boys. They're not even men. How many of them still live at home, live in their basements with their parents, their mommies, and they don't even call themselves men? They're angry. They're not fully employed. They aren't quite fully men. They're not contributing to the society. No. The society has let them down. They're just so angry, and they have to let everybody know they're angry. They have to bring their anger to the streets. They have to find someone to blame for their anger. They have to take their rage out in public. They have to hold the public hostage. They'll go attack someone and just will show them. Make their rage public.
All right, I don't know about anybody else, but this makes me think of people who talk about reverse racism. And there's a lot of people, when they talk about people who want to say that reverse racism exists, the response usually is, you want to be oppressed so bad. And so it's making me think about the relationship between entitlement and victimhood, right? Which is, and she's kind of touching on that, like your victimhood, people use victimhood to make them entitled to, right? It's kind of like I just said, like the preemptive excuse, but it's more than that. It's that almost like my life isn't perfect, and let me tell you all the ways that life isn't perfect, so as an excuse for whatever behavior that I'm going to put out. So like, I'm going to throw a temper tantrum. I'm going to yell and scream. I mean, I know she's talking about mass shooters, but I'm kind of applying it to day-to-day life like I do. But, I'm going to, when I have a bad day, everybody's going to suffer. Oh my gosh, which just made me think, if mama's not happy, nobody's happy. You know what I mean? Like, and in doing that and having these triggers that if you as a partner are not even in control of the thing that your person is triggered about or have, I mean, gosh, it could have been a previous relationship, it could have been their childhood, it could have been, but they're making it your responsibility to move and shape their environment in such a way that their behavior is excused, and they have this entitlement to you making their environment always comfortable and never triggering. It's really interesting. Okay. I'm gonna let her keep going.
Do you make your rage public? Where do people think that is okay to make their rage public? There are ways to make an issue come to the surface, a civil issue, a sexual issue, a social issue, but rage to go out and think, I'm so angry, I'm going to go attack people because I have the right to do that. Yes, I do. I have the right because I'm so special. I'm so privileged that I have the right. That's what a coward does. That's what a coward does. That's what people do who have absolutely no self-esteem, but they take anger and they use that as self-esteem. I am incredibly anti-Trump, and I'm not going to hide that anymore. He stood at a podium and said, I could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue, it'd be okay. Right then and there, we should have said, that man can't go near a public forum again, much less ever run for president or hold public office. But no, nobody sit back and said, did you hear what that?
Okay, I'm just putting out there. I don't want anything to get political in here. There's a whole reason I don't talk about political type stuff. So this is her saying these things. I don't talk politics on this platform. So just throwing that out there.
Lunatic said, he unleashed such rage. And people said, yeah, he tapped into this anger. What are people so angry about? What? That society is changing? That in fact, this country of ours is undergoing a major shift. The whole world is changing. Is anger going to change that? Oh, we're so angry. Everything in the country said, yeah, it is changing. It is changing because that's the nature of life. That is the nature of life. And if you look at this country and you look at its pattern from the get-go, the forcible importing of people from another country for slavery, people coming over from Europe, people coming over from Asia, if you look with clear eyes, it had the makings of the first global nation ever. Not the first racially divided nation, but the first global nation with a constitution capable of handling the first global nation, stating all men are created equal, not just all white men, but all men. What is it in human nature that makes people so afraid of equality, that makes people so terrified that if there is generosity built into the system, it means we won't have enough if we help them out? We are now suffering from the fear of equality, from the fear of it, from the fear of our own Constitution, from the fear of equal rights for women. Oh, I see what we can do. Let's turn them back into incubators. Let's keep them out of the workplace. Let's keep them pregnant and force even a 10-year-old girl from Ohio who was raped.
Okay, this isn't necessarily about woundology, so I'm going to go forward a little bit and try to get out of the political sphere.
Last time, politicians actually just, and the anger in the streets. And you know, it's so paradoxical. All these decisions, abortion based on Christian values, even Christian values, maniacal off-planet God, who decided, what's going to make me happy?
Okay, so she's gonna get into religion. Okay. Well, let's talk about the woundology part. Because I also don't want to debate religion here by any means. Oh, Compassionate says I was getting personal. Okay. So let's talk more about the beginning part that she was talking about. I thought that might be a good one. I should have probably done the woundology video, but she did talk about what it means. It's like her woundology is the study of wounds and then how people utilize their wounds rather than healing their wounds, right? Rather than taking accountability for their actions. And I tend to look at triggers and abuse and things that have happened to people, whatever they've been through. I try to equate it to something physical. I mean, you guys know I try to spin stories multiple different ways to see how it plays out, right? So I think about like if somebody was to hit me, okay? Um I'm going to have to tend to that wound. Right? Like if they hit me, it's their fault, right? They did the action. So the fault lies with them. Okay. We're going to pretend like I didn't hit first. Okay. So, but I have the wound. It's mine to now take care of. Like if it busts my cheek open, I've had my lip busted open before. It is not fun. Um, I now have the responsibility of that wound. The wound is not my fault, but if I have a busted cheek and I ignore it, it might get infected. It might scar. It might cause me more problems down the road, right? The same thing goes with psychological and emotional traumas. If you ignore it and you don't take care of it, then it's going to cause you problems on down the road. So it seems like if I'm equating this woundology as like somebody hits me, I ignore the wound and pretend like it's not there. And then I get upset at people for pointing out the wound. And then I expect everyone to allow me to wear a face covering at all times. Right? But you can't point out that I'm wearing a face covering and you can't say anything about what might be under the face covering. Like everybody has to change everything because I wouldn't tend to my wound. Okay? Or like if somebody well, I'm kind of klutzy. So if I run into the wall, wait, that is my fault. I got it. Somebody else has to be involved. Okay. We'll say somebody hits me on the arm. Okay. When you get hit really hard on a body part, right? All your blood and body fluids and things all rush to that area. That's why it gets hot. Okay. Because it gets there a lot of blood. I mean, there is some trauma and there's some bleeding, but everything rushes to that area to try to heal it, right? You will have plasma go to that area to stitch things together. You'll have increased blood flow. That's where we get swelling, things like that. So everything inside your body, when there is a trauma, a physical trauma, everything inside the body will rush to that area and fully concentrate on that area. It's kind of like if you have a headache and then you get hit really hard in the arm, you don't even have a headache anymore because literally all the focus, all the attention, all the body parts, everything goes to where that physical trauma happened. But what we tend to do when there is an emotional or a psychological trauma is we ignore it, right? We do one of two things. We ignore it and compartmentalize and pretend like it never happened and just hope that that thing, that feeling, and that trauma never pops out of the box again, right? Um, What happens to a wound if the body doesn't do that? It doesn't send plasma, it doesn't increase blood flow, it doesn't increase circulation to drain. It doesn't, it gets gangrenous, right? And then it rots. So we have this way to think about psychological and emotional trauma the same way as physical, right? If um um if I so I said I lost track. People do one of two things, right? So they'll either compartmentalize and ignore and hope that it never pops out again, which all those things stack up to where you finally blow. You either like one little thing happens and you just lose your ever loving temper, or you just start bawling and you can't stop and it all just comes flooding out. Like that's what happens when you compartmentalize, is that it will eventually come out. Now it leaks for a while, it could leak out. Little things can be happening and you could be overreacting, underreacting, refusing to react, all kinds of things. Hi, Lawrence Ross. Um, so, or if they don't compartmentalize, then it becomes part of their personality, right? Like there's a whole lot of I've been through this trauma, haven't you? And then all these people like will come together under this specific thing that they've been through. I do see women do this, and there is strength in healing, in meeting with people and talking about people who've been through the same thing. But at times it becomes part of the ego, right? So, and if anybody's watched me, you know what I'm talking about, but just a quick primer. Our ego is how we choose to present to the world, right? It's what we want the world to perceive of us. And in a way, there are times where we take our traumas or our wounds or things that we've been through and we wear it like it's part of us, right? We all know people who put things in their ego, right? Like the person who starts working out and they're working out all the time and they're getting really into fitness and religion and all this kind of, not religion, fitness and nutrition. And then that's all they can talk about, right? Because it starts to become part of their personality. So at times people have been through a trauma and then they wear their wound like a badge of honor somehow. Like, I've been through this, so you have to operate with kids' gloves. The other thing I was just thinking about is you will hear women say things, and oh my gosh, you guys have heard me mention this before because it drives me nuts, that women will tell other women, someday you'll find a man who will hug all your pieces back together. It is nobody else's responsibility. Again, if we think about if somebody physically wounds me, it's their fault that I was wounded and they should be held accountable, but it's my responsibility to heal that wound. That is accountability, right? That is taking responsibility for your life. You have to then take that wound and heal it. Is it fair? No, but that's life, right? Like that's life. You're If somebody injures me, I'm not going to get them to nursemaid me, nor would I want them to. Like, I don't want them around me if they hurt me. That's nuts. Okay. So, so I think, in watching what, BGS talked a little bit about it, the beginning part of this video is that um, people are wearing their wounds, their trauma, their slights, their perception of how the world is as excuses for crappy behavior and wanting everybody to sort of dance around them and make everything okay. Okay. So that it was super interesting. We talked about ego versus shadow. Okay. Adrix says, I say licking my wounds. Yeah, and I think people do say that. Like, especially like you're playing a sporting game, um, and your team loses. You you have to take time to process the disappointment of that, the irritation. If you feel like you weren't doing your best, you know, no matter what happens, no matter what disappointment there is, right? It's gonna all of those negative things, all the disappointment in life, people treating you poorly, your bad decisions getting you in a bad situation that you feel like you're stuck in, all of that goes into the shadow, right? And the more we compartmentalize and just throw stuff into our shadow because we're refusing to deal with it, our shadow just gets bigger. We're just feeding it to where it's like the Hulk, you know? And I didn't say Banner, I'm saying the Hulk. If you think about the shadow and the ego is a lot like Bruce Banner and the Hulk, right? Especially because anger is a big part of that, right? So Hulk is like the personification of Banner's shadow, right? Banner lost his parents. He had a, you know, he got into sciences and didn't process all of that. A lot, there's a lot in his shadow. And then what happens is, here we have the Hulk who is personifying Banner's shadow. And you'll notice I am not, let me caveat this. I am not a Marvel expert, but I like Marvel movies. So nobody, only correct me if I'm wrong, but otherwise don't ask me any questions because I don't know. But what I'll say is, if you watch the progression of the Hulk, when we finally get to the point where he's Professor Hulk and he's integrated, he's gone from, what is it called? World Breaker? Yeah, I think so. Hulk, this big giant planet smashing shadow, and he's done all this work to get to know Hulk, to process things, to come to an understanding. Hulk was in charge for quite a while, but we finally get to the point where we have Professor Hulk, where Banner and Hulk are integrated, right? And that's the processing work that we have to do. So the more we try to compartmentalize or actually feed our own ego with our trauma, every time you try to feed the ego, you're actually feeding the shadow, unfortunately. Because when we try to feed the ego, it's because we're feeding an insecurity. So hopefully people understood that part. But I do like to use Hulk as a way to explain shadow work, especially to men if they like, the Marvel movies and stuff like that, because sometimes it's kind of, what are you talking about? There's a shadow inside of me. Like, that sounds dumb, right? And it kind of does, because there's really actually not a shadow that lives inside of you. All of this is psyche, right? It's psyche. Now, I don't know if Snowman is in here, but I did tell Snowman that he could come up on panel today. I haven't seen him say hello. But if you guys have not, I think his channel is called Snowman Multimedia. He is, he's doing a series called Diary of a Mad Snowman. And he is doing like real-time shadow work. So instead of journaling and, writing down, he's actually creating videos where he's like telling stories, going through the process, re-experiencing those situations, talking through them, looking at things from a different perspective and trying to get things buttoned up. So you can hear the shadow work happening, and he's putting it in videos on YouTube because just in case it might help somebody else who's been through similar things to be able to process what they've been through. So he's a good one to watch. Let's see. BGS also, asked me to talk about Carolyn Mace, so that was good. He's got a channel that's Gnostic. So that if you like mysticism and stuff like that, and that's the direction you want to go with your shadow work, then um, he's a good one to listen to. But we're only 40 minutes in, but of course I didn't finish the video because I'm not gonna debate religion and politics. But um, if anybody has questions, can ask questions. Otherwise, we may just have a short one. I do want to say Shadow Work Wednesday is going well. We only have maybe 2 more sessions, possibly a third one, but maybe only 2 more sessions. If people are on the replay gang of Shadow Work, then appreciate you so much. I'm going to continue to do things like shadow work and talking about things like on lives and stuff like that, because I don't want, I want it to be free to you guys. I don't want money or time constraints um, to keep people from talking to a therapist or being able to experience some therapeutic techniques or learning some things about themselves, right? Like I don't want money and time to be part of that, which is why I want YouTube to pick up the tab. And so that's why this is the platform that I want to use um, to have YouTube pick up the bill. Now, I need your guys' help because about 47% of my viewers are not subscribed. So if we can subscribe, if we can share the watch time, my watch time is where I really need to catch up on to be able to get to the monetization. Because again, I just want YouTube to pick up the tab, not you guys. All right. Nina says this is great. BGS says which is better or both. I don't know which things you're talking about. Sorry. Which what is better? Oh, and Adric puts up the Cash App. I should probably check, right? I should probably check. See what we're doing. And it obviously does not want to load. Of course. Of course it doesn't. Okay. But I appreciate you putting it up. Oh, journaling or dialogue. Okay. I think it doesn't necessarily matter. But the thing you have to be watchful for is when you're journaling, you're using your left and right brain at the same time, right? Because your right brain is going to be very artistic and creating a picture and a scenario and a narrative. And then when you write and you use language, you're using the left side of your brain. So the simple act of writing it down does help process it. It will move things from the limbic system up to the neocortex where we can process it. And so writing has that added benefit, whereas free speaking doesn't necessarily pull in the left side of the brain as much, right? Because it's storytelling. And so we're using a lot of our right brain. That being said, another big thing that you want to do when you journal or diary things is you want to be able to look back at it and pick out patterns, pick out situations, pick out cycles and timelines and think you want to be able to look back. And that's super important to look back and find similar things to see if you're in a cycle or you're in a pattern that you can then break simply by knowing what it is and knowing what steps got you where. So, however you want to do it, please do it. If you're doing a video diary, be sure that you go back and listen for patterns. You could even do a transcript that you can then keep transcripts that you can read. Because again, when you're reading language, you're pulling in the left side of your brain. And so that helps you to process what's happening. So I guess I say all that to say that writing it down probably does help you process it faster, but simply doing it is huge. So Do it however it works for you. Just kind of keep in mind that you need to bring in the left brain somewhere, and you need to be able to reference back to look for patterns and cycles. Um, Nina says, I journal on my laptop because my thoughts come out better. Yeah, this typing, it's similar to writing. If you're typing, again, you're using language, which language is very mathematic. So it's on the left side. It's on the analytical side, languages, because it's about rules and all right. So BGS, should we handwrite or type? Yeah, it's the same thing. Like when you handwrite, you're forced to go slow, and sometimes it's hard to get the entire thought out. Some people don't type well at all. It just creates frustration. Some of us in my generation can all type because we all had to take typing class. But in using language and written word, it does help to process. So I'm going to again revert to use what works for you when we're journaling and using a diary, those kind of things. It's pretty emotional and should be, right? Because if you compartmentalize, this is you opening boxes and describing the contents, right? So you just have to find a way to pull left brain into this whole reprocessing piece, because the whole point of it is to get it out of you into or onto something else where you can interact with it, experience it, use your wise mind, which is your left brain and right brain together. It makes a wise mind. So we just want to be able to process it. I will say this, if you're doing it, and that's great. There's not really a wrong way to do it. I think that's why I'm hesitant to say things one way or the other, because sometimes people have the tendency, like I've said before, if I tell somebody I like dogs, and then they're like, why do you hate cats? So if I say, it's great to have a written journal where you have a thing, right? Like you have a thing that, and it's in there, and I can put it in there, that's spectacular. And then people are like, oh, well, she said I can't do. And that's not what I'm saying at all. So just do it. Just do it. That's the way to process, is by getting it out of you onto or into something else, so that we can use a wise mind to really look back at it. Okay. All right. So we do have the shadow work coming up. Y'all can catch up if you want. They're in the playlist, Shadow Work Wednesday, that's on my channel. You can go through the sessions, get caught up. You can watch them anytime you want, or you can come in live. On those, people have to have been a subscriber for 24 hours or longer to make comments, because it's a pretty personal thing that happens. I have noticed that the live chat replay doesn't load on those. I'll see if I can fix it. But for those particularly, I don't necessarily mind, because people talk about their personal stuff again, and it doesn't need to be everybody's business. Then next Sunday, we are going to talk about, not that, not the research that we're doing, not reparations. That one's almost ready. I don't know if I want to talk about microchimera, maybe, but I think next Sunday I'm going to hit on modern men and the soft girl era. I'm excited about that one. BGS says, should I keep my dream journal and my waking journal together? I think that's a personal preference. I don't. But I may compare at times, especially if I'm going back through my personal processing type journal and I notice a pattern, I will cross-reference a dream journal to see what was my subconscious telling me, because while we do have specific things that pop up. I don't know what that was. My, my Wi-Fi just petered out. Okay, so hopefully the screen didn't freeze on a terrible face, you know? Okay, so, we were talking about dream journal and waking journal. Now, for me, I keep them separate because in the dreams, I'm looking for archetypes and symbology. In my processing or more waking journal, I'm looking for patterns and cycles, um, and specific sets of behaviors and things like that, but they can be cross-referenced. Um, I think, I like to be super organized. So I think if I was to put the two together, I would have like the top of the page is like the waking stuff. And maybe, you know, knowing me, I would put it in a different color at the bottom, what my dream was the night before. That way it would make cross referencing easier. Um, for me personally, I just like to keep them separate. I hadn't ever really thought about putting the two of them together because I use them for different analyzing, if that makes sense. What do you do, BGS? Do you have them together or you have them separate? Or other people? Does anybody have them together or separate? Um, we hadn't even, in Shadow Work Wednesday, we never even really talked about dream journaling. I used to, for a while, I talked about maybe having a live and doing dream interpretation, which might be fun. Maybe that's something BGS and I could do together. My dream interpretation is Jungian, but it tends to get Freudian. So, that might be kind of a cool thing to do. But anyway, next Sunday, we will talk about modern men and the soft girl era. And probably the Sunday after that, we'll get into some kind of salacious things. So that'll be a clickbaity title when you guys see it. All right. I hope you guys have a great Sunday. We're at almost an hour, so that's great. For those of you who are mothers, I hope you have a great Mother's Day. All you single fathers holding it down, thank you to you as well. And I will see some of you on Wednesday and hopefully everybody else on Sunday.